Hi everyone, welcome to another episode, and welcome to Paris, at least in virtual terms. Even for me, I'm not on the streets of Paris at the moment. This is a home edition because as I'm looking out my basement window today, it is very much raining. So back to the home edition at least for 1 week, but don't worry, we'll be back on the streets again very soon. Speaking of being in the basement, if you hear anything in the background, it's either my kids upstairs destroying my house, or we have some brand new neighbors just next door who are using this Saturday, as they should, to renovate their kitchen. So if you hear any tap, 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 then it's that. But I've done, outside of that, every controllable noise I have sought to suppress for today's episode, and I hope everything's working. I had a little connection issue right at the beginning, but at the last minute I changed a setting, and I hope that you won't experience too much buffering. And I'm checking in on my comments here of the live viewers, and thank you so much for joining me. So it's a home edition today. I'm in the sous-sol, which means below ground, although our basement isn't technically below the ground. That is a random fact that you do not need to know to enjoy this episode, so I don't know why I added it. But thanks anyway. This is episode 111, and we'll jump into it very quickly. I'll remind my live viewers that the super chat function is available. That's a great way to support this project. And if so, I'll give you a shout out and a thank you. Otherwise, the Patreon link is in the description, as is my PayPal info and my merch store info. So lots of ways to support this if you are new or if you just forgot. And it's always very much appreciated. Bob, who's an avid learner of French, says in the comments, le sous-sol. Thanks, Corey, for that bit of vocab. Yeah, Bob, you know, when you buy your house in France, you'll be able to whip out that term from time to time, and hopefully you'll sound like a local. So today, I don't even remember what I called this episode, something about discoveries in the last medieval cloister. And by last, I mean the last remaining cloister, because the only intact cloister from the Middle Ages in the city of Paris is here in the Marais. We're spending our time in the 4th arrondissement, more specifically on the Rue des Archives, just north of the Hôtel de Ville, to give you an idea. And this is one of those, you could call it a best kept secret of the Marais, because where you're looking at this first image here, these are all my photos that I took on a recent visit. And remember before the pandemic when we could just go in the street and visit stuff? That was a very novel idea. From the outside here on the Rue des Archives, you can't see the cloister at all. In fact, this is a very nondescript type of building, and that red doorway is almost always closed. It happens to only be open when they have exhibits, because they use the cloister now as an exhibit space. And so if you see this door open, absolutely go into it. And there's another shot of the outside. But my point is here, I wanted to give you an idea that from the outside, it's very easy to pass by this gem, and it's very easy to not even know it's there. And I knew it on this day, I knew that it did exist. I had visited the cloister a few times during these temporary exhibits. But I did not expect on this particular day that a whole other world would open up to me. You know, sometimes a door is closed every time, and then it just happens to be open, and you realize that there are all these discoveries beyond the discovery. And so that's what we're going to enjoy today. Leslie says she has a pain au chocolat in the oven. Well done, Leslie. So you're doing it right. And Debbie Kuzinski says, I'd rather be sous le ciel de Paris. I'd rather be under the skies of Paris. Absolutely. Right. Of course, right now the skies are very wet, Debbie. But something tells me that you wouldn't mind. Quand même. So back to our episode here. So if you ever see these doors open, go ahead and pop in, because what you will find is this beauty here. Let me know in the comments if you have seen this before, if you've been lucky enough to visit it. So it is a cloister, or in French they would call it a cloitre, and it's called the Cloitre des Billettes. And les Billettes was a nickname for a religious order, and I'll tell you why they got that nickname in a moment. But this is just absolutely beautiful, and so few people know about it, and whenever you visit it, it's very, very empty, and of course makes it feel even more special. This section of the Marais was acquired in the year 1299 by a religious order called the Hospitaliers de la Charité Notre-Dame. And they were an order of brother monks. I mean, I use the term monks in general. I'm not an ecclesiastic expert by any means, and so I'm using that, a very broad term of a religious order of gents. And they managed to install a monastery here. And this cloister here that we're looking at comes from the 15th century. So it's flamboyant Gothic architecture. There are these beautiful arcades all the way around, and of course open air, just as a cloister is known to be. Cloisters, without getting in, too much into it, I mentioned this in an earlier episode, they were designed as places of relaxation and prayer and exercise, for the priests and the monks to walk around and meditate and whatnot. Sometimes there were gardens or fountains in the center of the cloisters. It was often a place to read and to, read scriptures and things like that. So what about this nickname, les Billettes? Because this is the Cloitre des Billettes, and they were known as the Billettes, the monks themselves. It's because they wore these adornments around their cloaks or around their robes that looked similar, as I understand it, to something like this. Again, I'm no expert, but this is what gave them the nickname of les Billettes, because billet in French could be translated into a small ticket or a small bill, like a dollar bill, so to speak. Normally, we would call that nowadays a billet, but billet, you could reasonably assume that it would mean a small version of a billet. And they were known to carry these religious necklaces of sorts around their necks as part of their wardrobe. So they were known as les billets, or the little tickets or the little bills. Peggy Baker says, hey, it's a backstage pass. Backstage pass to heaven, babe. That's what you get. We would all be so lucky, right? And then during the Middle Ages, as the monastery was in full swing, it became, as was very often the case, a school for young boys. And you can see a beautiful engraving here of this cloister. I love a good engraving. Now that doorway that you see to the right still exists. And it was the door that was usually closed when I would visit the cloister for the exhibits. And I was, believe me, happy enough just to discover the cloister one day and know that I could periodically, every now and then, pop in and just enjoy this beautiful Gothic space. But that door happened to be open, and here's one last view of a photo I took. And it's on the right-hand side. And that door led to a church that I frankly didn't know existed. So here's where we begin the adventure of the additional world that I didn't know was attached to the cloister. I don't know if this church is open every day, that the cloister is accessible, aka during the exhibits. But when I went through the door, I came across this. And of course, I was completely alone. There was not another soul in this church. I believe it's a functioning church, and they do have mass from time to time. But something about where it's located on the Rue des Archives, there's a lot of tree cover in front of the facade, and the street is narrow enough that you can easily walk by, and I guarantee you I have many times, walked by without realizing necessarily that there's a church there, and it is attached to the cloister. Now this church itself, it's called the Église des Billettes, and it is not, for those of you with a keen architectural eye, you may notice this is not Gothic architecture, so it does not date the church itself back to the Middle Ages as the cloister does. But we still got some good old-fashioned, some good old stones here, some vieux pierre, as they would say, and because this is from the 1750s. So this predates the French Revolution, and this is an absolute glorious piece of architecture. And so that's what a lot of these photos will be, is my unexpected discovery. And as you can imagine right now, I'm just so giddy, and I'm whipping out my camera, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I got to document this, and once in a lifetime sort of thing. Thank you so much, Leslie, for the support in the comments. She says, thank you for all the research and attention to detail, Corey. I very much appreciate that, Leslie. Thanks for joining me. Debbie says, wow, I love a good organ. Heather Jackson, I'll ask you to not reply to that comment, please. Jennifer says the organ is incroyable. Yeah, absolutely. And you can see here, there are multiple tiers, 2 different levels that you can climb up to, and that's what I'm going to show you. Beautiful. So this is really indicative of 18th century French architecture. And you can almost imagine the revolutionaries or the pre-revolutionaries spending time in a place like that with the very classical rather reserved balustrades. Speaking of the Revolution, the convent and this church were closed during the revolutions in the 1790s, which won't surprise you. That's what they did with all the religious structures. And as they often did with these churches, rather than destroy them, which they could have done, and occasionally they did, they decided, no, they'll be much more useful as warehouses to store various things. This one, as I understand it, happened to be for salt storage, which, when you hear about salt and saltpeter and things like that and charcoal, and it's almost an underhanded decision, I think, because the revolutionaries were very aware that things like salt would be very damaging to the walls and the frescoes and the paint jobs and whatnot of these churches, but that, of course, didn't bother them, being very anti-clergy. Hey, Chris is here from Dubai. Fantastic. We've got folks from Dubai and Tel Aviv, and Lisa says salt is so corrosive. Yeah, absolutely. So here is a look at the altar space. And when the revolutionaries turned this into salt storage, they turned the cloister itself into a carpentry workshop. Close-up of the chandelier. Hey, Marianne Borg's here from Australia, so we can stick that pin in the map as well. There is a pulpit. Beautiful, beautiful wood. In fact, this is a very duochromatic, so to speak, church, I would say. It's essentially the color of this warm, sort of walnut-colored wood and the rather gray limestone. Although you'll see in some shots up on the upper levels, there was some beautiful, gorgeous sunlight, some nice warm sunlight pouring in through some windows, and so it gave me some pretty interesting compositions. So we've got this lovely pulpit here, and we'll zoom in a little bit on it. You know, we always zoom in on those details. That's what we do. Oh, thanks, Nancy Brisson. Nancy Brisson says amazing photos, Corey. I appreciate that. I always put a lot of effort into them, and you know, sometimes I get a base hit, and sometimes I strike out. But that's just how it goes. Again, pulpit details. So I live for these moments where those of you who know Paris and love Paris as I do, you know what it's like to think you know an area and you think you know an address, and then, but in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't know what else is going to be, how else is it going to reveal itself to me? This happens with streets, it happens with churches, it happens with basements or parks or shops. I mean, like I mean, I could just go on and on, actually. Let me not go off on too far a tangent, but you know what I'm trying to say. This is looking past the pulpit back toward the organ, because why not? Ricky Beltran's digging the carving. This is the top of the pulpit here, and I'll zoom in a moment too. I have another image, but beautiful dove, I would assume. This, I always feel like it's a special occasion when I can come across this woodwork. I mean, I love good ironwork, don't get me wrong, but there's something about wood. And of course, I've read on occasion that, at least in the Middle Ages, they really believed in each material, each building material having its own spirit. And whereas iron was rather cold and perhaps even soulless, wood had a special place in the medieval mind of being a living, breathing, spiritual sort of material. And you can see the care that went into it. I would assume that this is all one piece. Oh, my goodness. Laura Green says the dove represents the Holy Spirit, as it should. Beautiful. And then here's another piece of the pulpit. Keep this shape in mind, this general shape of It's sort of a console slash corbel, a decorative element, because we'll see some others as well in a different style, but it was certainly part of the 18th century French aesthetic. And then you got the staircases. These gorgeous, I love when the staircases are shaped like this because you get so used to the medieval spiral staircase, which is, compared to this, rather austere and plain, although I love a good spiral staircase. But there's something about the 18th century where they gave it a lot more flair. In fact, almost a little, you could say a precursor to Art Nouveau, couldn't you? Look at how the railing winds its way up almost like it's a vine or some kind of stem of a plant. Absolutely stunning. And I took probably more photos of the staircase than I should have. I still edited them out, but believe me, there are like 25 of them. But look, how do you even design this? How do you sit down and design the precise measurements and angles of this thing? It's just absolutely, it's just a piece of art in its own right. Look at this. I labored over the composition of how to crop this, by the way. And this is what I ended up with. I hope it's sufficient. And, oh my goodness. Peggy Finkowski says, I love the staircase. And here's one more shot looking down. So again, there are a couple of different levels that you can explore in this church. And then we make it to the second level. And what you'll notice here are there are chairs there, obviously, and I assume when there's mass, people are allowed to sit up there. But the light was blasting through one side of the church during this afternoon where I was there, and what you see is some beautiful light spilling through here. So I thought, ooh, maybe I can get some kind of interesting composition. And so you can see it started to get really, really lovely. So there's that, but the shot that maybe I'm more proud of, that I think is one of the better ones that I took that day, was this one. And you know, of course, when you're in a place of worship and the sun comes through like that and it starts to feel very heavenly, it always adds an extra element to it. And I was thinking, dang, I'm not a churchgoer, but if I did have to attend mass here, I'd get myself one of those chairs. That's the VIP section right there, the box seats. June Parham says, "Oh, my shadows are my thing." Me too, June. I've never seen a shadow that I didn't want to photograph, to be honest. Sometimes you'll see a shadow and you'll photograph it and you'll think you're the next Ansel Adams, and then you'll get home and realize it's absolutely not interesting at all. But every now and then a shadow can really add something. Thanks, Lois, who says it's definitely an amazing shot. So if you're just joining live, by the way, we are in the Marais. We're at a cloister called the Cloitre des Billettes, and I visited there and discovered, unbeknownst to me, that there was a church, the Église des Billettes, just à côté, just next to it. And I was exploring it all alone. And as usual, at this time, I don't even know if I'm allowed to go through here. Was the door left open by mistake? But as you know, I will pretty much always take advantage of these opportunities. So here we're coming up on it's the same level number 2, but it's on the opposite side. It almost feels like a theater, doesn't it? It feels like a theater or maybe a courthouse, or I feel like when you see those the French Revolution era paintings of all the politicians gathered in a room or in a courtroom debating some issue, they always end up in spaces like this, I feel, with different layers of people like looking down on everyone. And thanks, Andrea Miles, for the support in the chat. She says, thank you for sharing your art with us. Thanks for calling it art, Andrea. Jeez Louise. That's lovely. Really appreciate that. And Barbara Cooper sent in some love. She says, your photos are amazing. Love the lighting. Thanks. Appreciate that, Barbara. Yeah, the light here, I got really lucky, didn't I? If this same little adventure, if it had happened on a cloudy day, I wouldn't have gotten quite the same shots, which goes without saying. The altar again. So the revolution came and went. This church was sold during the revolution, but then bought back by the city in 1808. So during the Napoleonic era. So the city buys it back and gives it back to the Lutherans, which, as I understand it, Napoleon was quite big on that, taking the churches and the places of worship and giving them back to the clergy. That was one of Napoleon's, one of his philosophies, so to speak, for lack of a better word. Now, what I found on the upper level, the third level, are a couple of things. I found some treasures. So there's just enormous piles of books. I would assume many of them are Bibles, but I didn't go through them. But I just love a good old book, and I didn't have the time to take a closer look. But I thought that was a pretty fun one. But what really excited me is check out what else I found up there. Keep in mind, I'm completely alone. I don't even know if I'm allowed in this church. First time I'd ever discovered it. But I found this old crate of publications. At first I thought they were newspapers, but then upon a closer look, they were some sort of publication from the church itself. And they're all bound up here in twine. And you can see here, if you get a little bit closer, can you make this out on your screen? This says August of 1910. You can actually, do you see here? This is where my thumb wiped away the dust to check the date. It was like a movie. 1910, people, so well over a century old. These things have been sitting in this church, probably getting moved around every decade or every 20 years or so, called Le Témoignage, or the witnessing. And it does say, actually, underneath the title, that it's a publication of the church. And just, I mean, come on, anything, just a stack of these from 1910. I will be honest, it did cross my mind at this moment that I could carry one of these little packets home with me, and probably nobody would necessarily miss it. But then I reminded myself that I was, in fact, in a house of God, and maybe it wasn't the time and the place to take a little souvenir for myself. But believe me, I mean, the temptation was there for a moment. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure some of you would contemplate, because having something like this, I guess if someone happened to be there, I could have simply asked, and they probably would have said, yeah, sure, why not? Because they had a whole case of them. But no, I decided to be a good boy, and but just such a treat. And then why not another view of the organ? Thanks, Laura, for the support. She says, thank you, Corey, for your attention to detail in your photography. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's all about the details, I think. So remember, I mentioned those decorative elements, and I said keep in mind the shape of the pulpit decoration, because this is not the exact same design, but very, very close. So there you go, 18th century. Louis, you could call this Louis XV, Louis XV / Louis XVI style. Or it probably fits somewhere into the quote-unquote classical era. I'm not going to try to go too far into that because I don't actually know what I'm talking about. So when you get to these higher floors, as you can see here across the way, we are at the top. And of course, this is the ceiling that you can see here of the church itself. So I was there and I thought, well, let's continue. Let's see what else I can find. And so I started, checking the doors and whatnot, and various portals. And what I found is that there was a doorway that was leading back toward the cloister itself. But of course, now that I'm 2 levels up, I was above the cloister. So this was also brand new to me. and it was an absolute treat. And of course, I took 150 photos of this view, but I just chose this one for you. Well, actually, that's not true. We'll see some others as we go. Jennifer Robinson says, deliciously sexy corbels. Your husband's so lucky, Jennifer, that you can whisper things like that to him at night. So I'm in a corridor at this point, and I've never been here before, and I'm wondering what's going to be at the end of the corridor. And in typical Parisian fashion, I did find another secret spot, another great discovery. And it was this room, which is along the side of the cloister opposite of where the church is. So as you enter the cloister, this would be on the upper left portion. And it appears to be a meeting room of some sort. And it had this lovely color, and of course these skylights, you can see the light coming through and casting these beautiful shapes on the wall. And the flooring, the parquet flooring, is obviously fab as well. And of course it's just completely dead quiet. And again, I don't technically know if I'm supposed to be here, but I'm being respectful, of course, and just grateful for every moment. Ellen Betancourt says, that ceiling and those floors. Oh, Barbara Cooper says a corridor. Oh, yeah, okay. I see what you mean, Barb. I don't know if you can hear that tap tap in the background, but again, that's the new neighbors. They seem like nice people, so we're not gonna get upset. Ellen says, terrible furniture though. Yeah, that's the case. They don't always, I don't think they it's not like they're calling an interior designer and saying, hey, can you find us a combo of modern chic, but also 18th century retro? Like, that's what we're looking for? No, I don't think they go that far. So here at one end, at the far end, opposite the door of this room, is a beautiful old ceramic furnace / heater, I would assume. And what I got a kick out of is, this is the zoomed in view a little bit, but then if I show you what more of the full wall looks like, look at this. So they've got the old heater, but I don't even think they use it, of course, anymore, because who has a pile of coal sitting around? So they've got the electric heater next door. Or maybe they use both in conjunction, who knows? So I like this view of modern heater and whiteboard with some various, meeting info scribbled, and then the gorgeous ceramic furnace is what I'm calling it, for lack of a better term. Thanks, Adriano. Adriano says, great experience in the comments. Thanks for the support. I appreciate that. Oh, Lily says, how much to ship that furnace to England? Yeah, because if they're not using it, Lily, I mean, the least they could do is throw you a bone. Look at this. So I don't have experience using these, but I assume that once you heat this sucker up, then it's going to radiate heat fairly well with all this beautiful terracotta or ceramic or whatever you'd like to call it. Look at that. Now, from the windows of this room, you have views upon the Cloitre, the cloister. But know that I'm going to switch it up here in these next few photos because, as you'll see, I switched to black and white, and the reason is you can probably make out my fingers in the reflection. My fingers and my little belly and some of the floor of the room here, and it was just way too distracting and too colorful, like my big, meaty, flesh-colored sausages here in reflection. So I decided it was easier to enjoy these shots in black and white. So this is looking out, the cloister is right here. And this is, of course, a beautiful, rather sprawling little terrace here, a little balcony space, absolutely large enough for a picnic. I hope the people who use this building every now and then in the summertime, I hope they do have their lunch out there, looking down over the cloister. And I would assume that this door here would lead you back to the church. So you enter, you can actually see the doorway right here from the street, from the Rue des Archives. And you enter, and I went this way into the church, made my way upstairs, discover, almost committed a theft in the house of God, and then I came through here, this corridor, and it led us into the room where we are. To be honest, every now and then, just out of necessity, I'll switch one of my photographs to black and white, and I always say to myself, "Ooh, it's kind of nice. It has a different feel." Like I wonder, it'd be fun to do a whole series in black and white, actually. As much as I love color, I absolutely adore working with color in my photos. But something about black and white that just gives it that feel. Oh, thanks, Jen. Jennifer Robinson says these are super cool shots in black and white. Appreciate that. This is the last black and white shot. Any of us is fortunate, but I'm just going to speak in first person here. I am so fortunate to be able to just randomly pop into one of these spaces and have an experience that is completely beyond the already fantastic experience of what I expect. You know what I mean? I mean, I already knew of this cloister, and now I hope that some of you who have already been here will make your way into the church next time. So one last look at the room. I took this sort of fisheye view of the same room. You can see much better the skylights. At this point too, I shouldn't mention this, but at this point too, I really had to use the facilities, and I was like, oh my goodness, I gotta find a spot, and there happened to be a restroom here, so I very respectfully and in a very clean fashion relieved myself, and I'm very grateful for that too. I don't know why I'm sharing that. It's all part of the adventure, you know. I mean, having to pee is part of these discoveries, because you get caught in this sort of rabbit hole that you didn't expect to spend an hour roaming around and taking photographs, and all of a sudden you realize, I'm in emergency mode and I need to take care of this, otherwise I'm no longer going to enjoy this experience at all. But anyway, there happened to be a little break room and a little kitchenette actually next to this, so clearly it's in use. So whoever you are out there, if you happen to use this building and you're associated with the Cloister, know that I was very respectful using your facilities, and I really appreciate it. It really saved me. So this is the last photo of the episode, and this is making my way back out onto the street and actually looking up toward the church itself, the Église des Billettes. And it is, like I said, it's a narrow street, a lot of trees, a lot of commotion, and a lot of stuff to look at. So it is absolutely very easy to miss this. And it's not a facade that'll really grab you. But there you go, from the 1750s. The Église des Billettes and the Cloitre des Billettes, the oldest, not the oldest, Corey, but the last remaining cloister. So I hope you enjoy that, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. And I think we're going to wrap things up here. Hopefully next weekend the weather will be better. You may have heard the cherry blossoms are absolutely in bloom in Paris, and I considered trying to do them in the rain today, but because I'm commuting by bike, I thought, no, I don't want to spend 2 hours in the rain. And but maybe next weekend, I'll find a way to present the blossoms to you in all their glory. June Parham says, fabulous presentation. Thank you, June. Hopefully you can hear in my voice that I'm very relaxed and content here in my basement. I got the window open looking into my backyard, and the birds are chirping, and it turns out the neighbors didn't make too much of a racket, and neither did my daughters upstairs. Thanks, everybody. So again, just one last reminder, Patreon link in the description, my Paris merch link, another great way to support the cause, and on and on and on. Check out my Instagram. I'm putting a lot more photos on there, getting more serious about the whole photography thing, and I'd love to have you over there sharing in that experience. Thanks, Ricky Beltran, for the super chat. Right under the gun. Appreciate that. And there won't be a cafe chat today, folks. I won't be available for that. This is about as much time as I can steal away from the homestead and the family. We are under confinement. We're in a lockdown here, as you may know, and so the kids have been home for many days, and so it's all we can do, my wife and I, to team up and take care of the family duties, the parenting duties, so I don't want to be gone too long. But we'll do cafe chat soon, and I will catch you on the next episode, episode 112, if I'm not mistaken. So thanks a lot for joining me. Continue your Paris dreaming. I know those of you who want to get here, it's only a matter of time now. We're getting there. We're getting there. So I can't wait to see you all here in person, and hope you can visit this cloister in person one day and give the church a look. Okay, everybody, have a lovely rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, and I will catch you on the next episode. Take care.